Harry Potter makes zero sense. Felix Felicis, also known as Liquid Luck, is the single biggest plot hole and most controversial potion in the entire wizarding world. A potion that literally makes everything you do succeed. And somehow, nobody in the entire wizarding world thought to mass produce it, stockpile it, or hand it out like candy before the biggest magical war in history. Instead, they just let Voldemort run around with his snake face and his Horcruxes while a golden shimmering cheat code sat right there in their potions textbooks. So today we're going to break this whole thing wide open. Why didn't they brew barrels of this stuff? Why didn't Dumbledore chug it before every mission? What if Lily Potter had taken a sip that night Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow? And the most baffling question of all, why didn't Fred and George Weasley, the entrepreneurial geniuses of the wizarding world, just mass-produce Felix Felicis at Weasley's Wizard Wheezy's and sell it like butterbeer? The answer isn't simple. When you actually dig into it, you realize that Felix Felicis isn't a plot hole at all. It might actually be one of the most brilliantly balanced pieces of magic rolling ever created. But to understand why, we need to start at the very beginning. Felix Felicis was invented in the 16th century by a wizard named Sigismund Budge. Budge was a student at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry back in the 1500s, who went on to become one of the most accomplished potioneers the wizarding world had ever produced, at least according to him. He authored the Book of Potions, and Felix Felicis was his magnum opus. He called it his masterpiece, the crowning achievement of his career, bottled good fortune. The man was clearly very humble. But what exactly does this potion do? When brewed correctly, Felix Felicis looks like molten gold, with little droplets leaping across the surface like tiny golden fish jumping out of a bowl. It's beautiful, it's mesmerizing, and when you drink it, everything you attempt succeeds. The potion essentially whispers in your ear and tells you exactly the right thing to do at exactly the right moment. It puts you in tune with your own fate. You feel this irresistible urge to go left instead of right, to say this instead of that. And somehow, every single one of those instincts leads to the perfect outcome. When Harry drank it before going to get Slughorn's memory, he described the feeling perfectly. He knew exactly what he was doing, or at least Felix did. He didn't have a plan. He just followed the feeling, and it led him on this bizarre winding path through Hagrid's hut and Aragog's funeral that somehow impossibly ended with Slughorn tearfully handing over the most important memory in the entire war against Voldemort. So yeah, this potion is insanely powerful, which brings us right back to the big question. Why on earth didn't everyone use it all the time? Start with the most practical reason. Felix Felicis takes 6 months to brew. 6 months. That's half a year of careful, precise, incredibly advanced potion making for a single batch. And we're not talking about a cauldron full. We're talking about maybe enough to fill a small vial. The bottle Harry won from Slughorn contained roughly enough for 4 or 5 uses total. He used 1 dose himself and split the rest between Ron, Hermione, and Ginny. That's it. 6 months of work for a few tablespoons of golden liquid. Think about what that means in the context of a war. When Voldemort returned at the end of the Triwizard Tournament, nobody had 6 months of peace and quiet to sit around brewing potions, and even if they started immediately, by the time the Felix was ready, the war would have been already moved on. War doesn't wait for a potion to finish shimmering. You can't exactly tell Voldemort to hold off on his noseless plans for 26 weeks because you've got something on the stove. And even if time weren't an issue, there's a deeper problem that fans love to overlook. The obvious Muggle solution. Just build a factory and mass-produce the stuff like Coca-Cola. This argument runs headfirst into the most stubborn wall in wizarding culture. Wizards despise Muggle methods. There was no industrial revolution in the magical world. The magical world never built assembly lines or automated anything. The very idea of a conveyor belt charmed to stir cauldrons would horrify most pure-blood families. Wizards can build enchanted castles and travel across continents without aeroplanes. But when it comes to brewing a potion, every step is still done the old-fashioned way. 1 cauldron, 1 pair of hands, 1 recipe followed to the letter. The entire philosophy of potion making is built on individual craft, closer to an artisan's workshop than a pharmaceutical lab. Scaling up would require the kind of standardized, repeatable manufacturing process that the wizarding world has spent centuries actively rejecting. They'd sooner trust a hand-stirred cauldron than a machine, even if that machine could churn out Felix Felicis by the barrel, which, given the potion's tendency to explode when brewed incorrectly, might actually be the the smarter instinct. But the brewing time is honestly the least of the problems. Even if you had 6 months, most witches and wizards couldn't brew this potion anyway. Harry Potter himself, while holding Severus Snape's Half-Blood Prince annotated textbook with Snape's personal corrections and improvements that elevated even standard recipes like the Draught of Living Death, far beyond what the original text described, looked at the Felix Felicis recipe and said it was seriously complicated. And this was a kid who had just brewed a perfect Draught of Living Death on his first try, using the same annotations. If Harry thought Felix Felicis was out of his league even with Snape's cheat sheet, imagine what it would be like for an average witch or wizard. For context, compare it to something like Polyjuice Potion, which Hermione, one of the most talented students Hogwarts had ever seen in generations, considered an extraordinary challenge at 12 years old. Or Veritaserum, which is so difficult and so tightly controlled that the Ministry of Magic strictly regulates who can brew and possess it. Felix Felicis makes both of those look straightforward by comparison. Slughorn's ability to successfully brew it was treated as genuinely noteworthy. This wasn't just any potion. This was the potion-making equivalent of climbing Everest. Most people who attempted it would fail. Worse still, if you brew it wrong, the results are disastrous. Not oops, it doesn't work. We're talking potentially poisonous sludge. And the worst part, Slughorn never specified how you'd even know if you'd brewed it incorrectly. You might not find out until you drink it. Imagine taking what you think is liquid luck and instead it's liquid death. That's not a gamble most people are willing to take. Then there are the ingredients themselves. Felix Felicis requires Ashwinder eggs, Murtlap tentacles, and Alchemy eggshells, among other components. If you've seen Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, you know that alchemies are these gorgeous but incredibly dangerous serpentine creatures that are fiercely protective of their eggs, which happen to be made of pure silver. Good luck popping down to the magical equivalent of a grocery store for those. These are rare, exotic, and expensive ingredients that would be nearly impossible to acquire in any quantity, let alone enough to sustain mass production. Speaking of mass production, let's address the Fred and George question, because this is one of the fans bring up constantly. Fred and George Weasley were brilliant. They opened Weasley's Wizard Wheezies at 93 Diagon Alley, and it was an immediate smash hit. They sold everything from extendable ears to skeeving snack boxes to love potions to pygmy puffs. They even developed defensive magical objects during the war. So why not add Felix Felicis to the product line? Imagine Liquid Luck sitting right next to the 10-second pimple vanishers. It would have been the best-selling product in wizarding history. But here's why it was completely impossible. First, the complexity almost certainly extended beyond their considerable talents. Fred and George were inventors and entrepreneurs, not potions masters. There's a massive difference between creating clever joke products and brewing one of the most advanced potions ever invented. The kind of recipe that even Severus Snape, a genuine prodigy who was improving upon standard potions text while still a Hogwarts student, would have approached with caution. Second, imagine trying to stock a retail shop with a product that takes 6 months to make per batch, requires incredibly rare ingredients, and carries no guarantee of actually working. Your production timeline is half a year, your yield is tiny, your failure rate is probably enormous. And if you do mess it up, you might accidentally poison your customers. A lawsuit waiting to happen, disguised as a business plan. And that brings up the liability issue. If Weasley's Wizard Wheezies sold Felix Felicis and a single batch came out wrong, and some poor witch or wizard drank it thinking they were about to have the luckiest day of their life, and instead ended up in St. Mungo's, that shop would have been shut down faster than you can say Merlin's beard. Now let's get to the really juicy stuff. Why didn't Dumbledore use it? Why didn't the Order of the Phoenix maintain a strategic supply? In the video game adaptation of Half-Blood Prince, Harry actually asks Dumbledore if he's ever taken Felix Felicis, and Dumbledore's answer is perfect. He admits he's taken it, but only recreationally. He believes a person creates their own luck. That response tells you everything you need to know about his philosophy. He understood that the most seductive forms of magical shortcuts often led to ruin. He'd seen it with the Deathly Hallows, with Grindelwald, with Voldemort. Dumbledore believed that true victory came from courage, sacrifice, and choices, not from bottled fortune. But beyond philosophy, there's a hard mechanical limitation that fans often overlook. Felix Felicis cannot override powerful magic. Hermione pointed this out directly. Luck can only get you so far, and it can't break through a genuinely powerful enchantment. During the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, the members of Dumbledore's army who had taken Felix couldn't bypass Draco's Peruvian instant darkness powder. The potion helped them dodge curses and kept them alive, absolutely, but it couldn't break through magical barriers or defeat powerful enchantments. That's the crucial distinction that makes the whole just use Felix against Voldemort argument collapse. Felix Felicis doesn't make the impossible possible. It increases the probability of favorable outcomes in situations where favorable outcomes already exist as possibilities. It opens doors that are already slightly ajar. It doesn't blast through walls. Think about what defeating Voldemort actually required: finding and destroying 7 Horcruxes hidden behind ancient wards protected by soul magic, concealed by the Fidelius charm, getting past a lake full of Inferi, breaking into Gringotts, surviving the killing curse. No amount of luck gets you through any of that. These weren't improbable situations, they were impossible ones without these specific knowledge, skills, and sacrifices that Harry and his friends brought to the table. And here's something else people forget. Felix Felicis gives you what you need, not what you want. Harry wanted Slughorn's memory, specifically the memory that would reveal how Tom Riddle had learned to create Horcruxes. But Felix didn't march him straight to Slughorn and force the old man to hand it over. It took him on a roundabout journey through Hagrid's garden and Aragog's burial that seemed completely random but turned out to be exactly the right path. In a war, you might want to win the duel, but what you need might just be to escape alive. Felix would help you run. That's a pretty significant limitation when you're trying to defeat the most powerful, dark, noseless wizard of all time. Then there's the toxicity problem, which is honestly terrifying. Slughorn explicitly warned that Felix Felicis is highly toxic in large quantities, calling overdosing dreadfully dangerous. But it gets worse. Even before you reach lethal doses, the side effects start creeping in. Overuse causes giddiness, recklessness, overconfidence, and a complete erosion of your natural self-preservation instincts. It makes you impulsive and mentally unstable, leading to catastrophically poor decision-making. The exact opposite of what the potion is supposed to do. Imagine a soldier hopped up on Felix, charging into battle feeling invincible, only for the potion to wear off mid-fight. There's actually a coming down period when the effects fade, and during that window all the unlucky circumstances that were being held at bay come crashing back all at once. That's a death sentence on a battlefield. Historical records back this up. After Budge invented Felix Felicis, 2 of his early test subjects reportedly developed such extreme overconfidence that they attempted feats of magic wildly beyond their abilities, with predictably messy results. The potion's reputation as a shortcut to greatness attracted exactly the kind of reckless wizards who should never have been allowed near a cauldron, let alone a luck-altering substance. By the time the Ministry caught on and started regulating it, the damage was already baked into the potion's legacy. Felix Felicis arrived in the world promising infinite possibility, and immediately proved why infinite possibility without a safety net is just a fancier word for chaos. On top of everything else, Felix Felicis is a banned substance. The Ministry of Magic has strict regulatory frameworks governing its use. It's illegal to use in organized competitions, sporting events, examinations, and elections. Quidditch fans protested almost immediately after its invention, and the potion was banned from all competitive events. The wizarding world already had legal frameworks in place restricting its use, which tells you something about how seriously they took its potential for abuse. Now let's talk about the most heartbreaking what if of all. What if Lily Potter had drunk Felix Felicis the night Voldemort came to Godric's Hollow? Could she have survived? Could she have saved Harry without dying? The answer, sadly, is almost certainly no. The Potters went into hiding under the Fidelius charm, which was considered the most powerful protection available. The potion didn't fail them. Peter Pettigrew did. That was a human betrayal, not a magical limitation. And even if Lily had somehow obtained Felix Felicis, she would have needed to start brewing it 6 months in advance. By the time the Potters knew they were specifically targeted by Voldemort, there simply wasn't time. And even setting aside the timeline, the logistics collapse on closer inspection. Felix Felicis works by nudging the drinker toward the best available outcome, but when Peter Pettigrew was chosen as secret keeper, the best available outcome may have already been sealed. The betrayal happened before Voldemort ever arrived at Godric's Hollow. A luck potion can't unchoose a traitor. It can't rewrite a decision that was already made weeks earlier. The Potter's doom wasn't a matter of bad luck on one night. It was a chain of trust that broke long before the front door did. And even with time, a potion that works by nudging probabilities can't override a prophecy or protect against the killing curse. What saved Harry that night was something far more powerful than liquid luck. It was his mother's love and her willing sacrifice. But just for fun, let's imagine a world where Fred and George actually pulled it off. Say they figured out the recipe, sourced enough alchemy eggshells to bankrupt a small country, and somehow convinced the Ministry to look the other way. Weasley's Wizard Wheezies now sells Felix Felicis right between the puking pasties and the pygmy puffs. What happens next? Well, first every single Hogwarts student walks into their OWLs glowing gold and grinning like an idiot. Exam scores skyrocket overnight. The Ministry has to throw out the results and reschedule the whole thing, which, knowing the Ministry, takes about 4 years and a committee nobody asked for. Quidditch becomes unwatchable because both seekers catch the snitch at the same time, and the rulebook has no answer for that. The referee quits. 3 referees quit. Professional Quidditch shuts down for a season while the International Confederation of Wizards argues about potion testing protocols. Meanwhile, personal lives go completely sideways. Ron takes a sip before dinner and somehow says exactly the right thing to Fleur Delacour at exactly the right moment. They're dating by Thursday. Mundungus Fletcher brews a knockoff in his bathtub, sells it out of a suitcase in Nocturne Alley, and retires somewhere warm before anyone tests the product. Half of what he sold was pumpkin juice with glitter. The other half was genuinely toxic. St. Mungo's opens an entire new ward for liquid luck-related injuries, staffed exclusively by healers who look permanently exhausted. And the war? Well, here's where it gets interesting. Imagine Dumbledore's army, every single member dosed up on Felix before the Battle of Hogwarts. Spells miss them by inches, walls collapse in exactly the right direction, and Neville finds the Sword of Gryffindor in a bathroom drawer instead of pulling it from the sorting hat. Voldemort fires the killing curse and it ricochets off a chandelier, hits Nagini, bounces into a load-bearing wall, and somehow also files his taxes. Nobody dies. Fred survives. Tonks and Lupin survive. Voldemort trips over his own robes and gets escorted to Azkaban by a very smug Percy Weasley. It's a beautiful image, and also completely ridiculous, which is exactly why it was never going to happen, which honestly brings us to the most beautiful aspect of this entire discussion, and the reason Felix Felicis is actually genius writing rather than a plot hole. One of the most memorable Felix Felicis moments in the entire series doesn't even involve the real potion. Before a crucial Quidditch match, Harry pretended to slip Felix into Ron's pumpkin juice at breakfast. Hermione saw him do it and was furious. Ron drank the juice anyway, went out and played the best game of his life. Afterward, Harry revealed the truth. He'd never actually added the potion. The vial was still sealed. Ron's confidence, his belief that luck was on his side, that was enough. He had the talent all along. He just needed the belief in himself. And that's the entire thesis of Harry Potter wrapped up in one scene. The magic was never in the potion, it was in the person. Felix Felicis exists in the Harry Potter universe as a reminder that luck can open doors, but it cannot walk through them for you. True victory, the kind that defeats Dark Lords and saves the world, belongs to those who combine skill, courage, friendship, and sacrifice. Harry possessed all of those qualities long before he ever tasted a drop of molten gold. The wizarding world could never have mass-produced liquid luck, not because they didn't want to, but because the universe itself seemed to understand that some shortcuts aren't meant to be taken. Felix Felicis is rare for a reason, dangerous for a reason, and limited for a reason, because in the end, the most powerful magic in the Harry Potter universe was never found at the bottom of a cauldron. It was found in the hearts of the people brave enough to fight without it. So yeah, wizards couldn't even mass-produce a luck potion without blowing up the cauldron. Imagine giving them actual machinery. Why the wizarding world never developed technology. That's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before a house elf unplugs your router.